Okay, well, this evening we're picking up the story of the Exodus in chapter 17. We saw last week how the people had complained about the water which was bitter when they reached the place called Mara. The name itself means bitterness, and complaining to Moses that they were unable to drink the water. And Moses had been instructed by God to throw a tree or branch of a tree into the water, which then solved the situation, and the people then were able to drink that water. And then there was further complaint as they moved on in their journey. They complained about the food situation, and they expressed their desire to go back to the land of Egypt, where there was plenty of food for them to eat, where they enjoyed all different types of food, and they accused Moses of bringing them into the wilderness to kill them with hunger. And so God again provided for them, this time in the form of the manna and quail that came upon the camp, and the daily provision of the manna for the people to eat. And that provision of manna would continue for the whole period in which they were in the wilderness until 40 years later, they made it into the land of Canaan. So we pick up the story here in chapter 17. This is the map that we're following here, following the route, the red dotted line there heading south, and we come to this region known as Rephidim, which is where the incidents that we're looking at this evening take place here in chapter 17 and in chapter 18 as well. So this is close now to Mount Sinai, which is their destination, where they're heading to. So read here Exodus chapter 17, verses 1 to 7. All the congregation of the people of Israel moved on from the wilderness of Sin by stages according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people found fault with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you find fault with me? Why do you put the Lord to the proof?" But the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst?" So Moses cried to the Lord, "What shall I do with this people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Pass on before the people, taking with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the rod with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water shall come out of it, that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, because of the fault finding of the children of Israel, and because they put the Lord to the proof by saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" So the journey continues here from the wilderness of Sin to this place named Rephidim. And this is the last stop, really, before they reach Mount Sinai itself. The journey was made by stages, we're told, according to the commandment of the Lord. So the Lord is directing them, and the presence of the Lord is still with them through the pillar of the cloud and the fire which is guiding them. But arriving in Rephidim, they found that there was no water to drink. So once again, the problem is with the water. This lack of water now caused the people to murmur and to find fault with Moses. So they said to Moses, "Give us water to drink." And in reply, Moses asks, "Why do you find fault with me? Why do you put the Lord to the proof?" Is it Moses' fault that there's no water there? Fault is really the key word of the passage. The word that's used means to argue or to contend. So they're having this argument or contention with Moses over this. And once again, the people consider that their departure from Egypt will be the cause of their death, as they had said before the provision of the manna, as we saw last week. So they ask again to Moses, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst?" Complaining is, or grumbling is very often infectious. It can often start with someone making some minor complaint about something, but then it very soon spreads amongst a larger group of people. And perhaps that's the case here, that this complaining spread amongst the people, and it can be disheartening when there's so many complaints are going on. So for help here, Moses cried to the Lord. He says, "What shall I do with this people? They're almost ready to stone me." Moses' words there seem to be uttered in desperation, that he's at his wit's end to know what he ought to do. And the people are ready, it seems, to reject Moses' leadership. He says they're almost ready to stone me. God gives instructions then once again to Moses, and he is to take some of the elders of Israel, and with his rod, the rod that he'd used in Egypt to strike the Nile, and which had played such an important part in all of the events, and he is to go to the rock at Horeb. Horeb is the name that's used interchangeably with Mount Sinai. Two names are used of the same place. So it shows how close really they were to Mount Sinai at this time. It may be that the name Horeb covers perhaps a wider geographical area that would include Rephidim as well. And there, God says that he will stand on the rock. So God will stand on the rock, and then Moses is instructed to strike the rock. So God is identifying himself with this rock that Moses is instructed to strike. So Moses does as God has commanded. He strikes the rock, and when he does so, water comes forth from the rock for the people to drink. It must have been an abundance of water that came out to provide water for these hundreds of thousands of people. So Moses did then as God commanded, and God made this provision for them once again. The incident is referred to in a couple of the Psalms, in Psalm 78. We've looked at these Psalms in previous lessons as they make reference to the events of the Exodus. Psalm 78, verses 15 and 16, which says, He cleft rocks in the wilderness and gave them drink abundantly as from the deep. He made streams come out of the rock and caused waters to flow down like rivers. So the description there in the psalm indicates to us the abundant provision that God made of this water, that he gave them drink abundantly as from the deep, and these streams coming out of the rock, flowing like rivers, we're told. And then in Psalm 105 and verse 41, he opened the rock and water gushed forth. It flowed through the desert like a river. Again, a pictorial description of that water there, the rock opening and this water gushing out, not a trickle of water, but gushing out, flowing through the desert like a river, the abundant provision that God makes. The place where this happened is given two names here by Moses. It's called Massa and Meribah. And the word Massa means proof, and Meribah means contention. And the reason for the names is explained here because of the fault finding of the children of Israel, and because they put the Lord to the proof by saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" So by their fault-finding attitude, they were in effect, putting God on trial, putting God on proof. Prove that you are amongst us is their challenge to God. This was the nature of their testing of God. They're asking, if is the Lord really among us? If the Lord is really with us, then surely He's going to provide us with this water. The incident is referred to in Psalm 95, verses 8 and 9 as well. and the names, these names are mentioned here in the Psalm. Psalm 95 and at the end of verse 7 and then into verse 8. Oh, that today you would hearken to his voice. The psalmist here is addressing the people of his own time, but he's referring back to this incident here. Oh, that today you would hearken to his voice. Harden not your hearts as at Meribah, as on the day of Massah in the wilderness, when your fathers tested me and put me to the proof, though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation and said, they are a people who err in heart and they do not regard my ways. Therefore I swore in my anger that they should not enter my rest. So God, speaking through the psalmist here, is making reference to that incident, telling the people at the time when the psalm is written not to be like those people at Meribah and Massah. And then in the New Testament, in Hebrews chapter 3, the writer to the Hebrews quotes from that psalm and applies it to the people of his day as well. So in Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 7, he says, therefore, as the Holy Spirit says, and then we have the quote from Psalm 95, today when you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion on the day of testing in the wilderness, where your fathers put me to the test and saw my works for 40 years. Therefore I was provoked with that generation and said, they always go astray in their hearts. They have not known my ways. As I swore in my wrath, they shall never enter my rest. Take care, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. But exhort one another every day as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. And then further on in chapter 3 and then into chapter 4 as well, the writer makes further references to Psalm 95 and that incident in order to encourage the Hebrews that he's writing to not to be like these people. Don't harden your heart against God, because if you do, then you will not enter God's rest. That's the warning that the writer is giving there. So these events from the past then provide lessons for future generations. So that event recorded there in Exodus chapter 17 provided a lesson for the people of the time when Psalm 95 was written, and then another lesson for the people who received the Hebrew letter in the New Testament. And when we read it, it's a lesson for us as well. So the lesson is passed on from generation to generation. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 1 to 4, the Apostle Paul makes reference to several incidents from this time in the wilderness here, including the provision of the water from the rock. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 1, he says, I want you to know, brethren, that our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same supernatural food, that's the manna, and all drank the same supernatural drink, for they drank from the supernatural rock which followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things are warnings for us, not to desire evil as they did. So again, there Paul is using those incidents from that time as a warning for his readers. Don't be like those people. Don't follow their example. So we see how the scriptures and the stories are used by later writers in order to teach lessons in their own time, and they're lessons that we can learn when we read these stories as well. We'll read on now. We have another incident. The problems continue for Israel here. We've had the complaints concerning the water and the complaints concerning the food. And there's another problem about to face them now in the form of the Amalekites, who are going to threaten Israel here. So this is chapter 17, verses 8 to 16. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel at Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men and go out, fight with Amalek tomorrow. Amalek tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat upon it. And Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, so his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua mowed down Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said to Moses, write this as a memorial in a book, and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it, The Lord is my banner, saying, a hand upon the banner of the Lord. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. The Amalekites were a nomadic people who occupied the Sinai Peninsula. And according to Genesis chapter 36, the Amalekites were the descendants of one of Esau's sons. The Amalekites would have seen the arrival of this large group of Israelites and their animals as a threat, and so they prepare to fight against them here at Rephidim. They want to protect their own territory, and they want to perhaps control the water supplies, and they don't like these intruders who have come into their area. We can see another reference to this incident in Deuteronomy. Gives us another little detail about it here. Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 17 and 18, which is thinking back to this incident. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you came out of Egypt, how he attacked you on the way when you were faint and weary, and cut off at your rear all who lagged behind you, and he did not fear God. So we see what the Amalekites were doing there. They were picking off the weak ones at the rear, those who were faint and weary, those who were struggling to keep up. They were picking those ones off. So that gives us another insight into the incident there. So here then Moses calls upon Joshua to organize the Israelite men to fight against the Amalekites. And this is the first time that Joshua is mentioned in the account. And he will take on a more prominent role. He is described as being the servant of Moses, and he's in preparation really to succeed Moses as leader of the people when they go into the land. So whilst the battle is taking place, Moses himself will be on top of a hill, again with the rod of God in his hand. So Joshua then does as Moses has instructed him, and Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. They'd be able to observe the battle going on from there. Hur is only mentioned on one other occasion. We don't know anything more about him, who he was. The other reference to him is in Exodus chapter 24 and verse 14, where he's again mentioned alongside Aaron here. This is after Moses and Joshua have gone up to the mountain of God. And verse 14 says, he said to the elders, tarry here for us until we come to you again. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a cause, let him go to them. So Hur is sort of working alongside Aaron there in providing sort of leadership for the people in the absence of Moses and Joshua. So these are the only two references that we have to her, so we don't know anything more about him. But the success of the Israelites in the battle was dependent on Moses keeping his hand raised. Presumably, he's holding aloft the rod of God. And when he lowered his hands, the Amalekites prevailed. But the really the holding up of his hands is a symbolic action to show dependency upon God. When Moses became tired, Aaron and Hur brought a stone for him to sit on, and they held up Moses' hands, one on either side of him. So that and they did that until the sun went down. So that would ensure that Israel prevailed in this battle. And we're told in verse 13 there that Joshua was successful, mowing down the Amalekites with the edge of the sword. So the Israelites have this victory over the Amalekites on this occasion. And an account of the victory was to be recorded and read in the hearing of Joshua. This is one example of the keeping of written records during this period. We find other references to things being written down at this time. So this is written down. The account of this battle is written down. It's there as a remembrance, as a memorial to the event. And God says that He will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Moses then built an altar and he gave it the name, "The Lord is my banner." Yahweh Nissi is the name given to this altar. And verse 16 says that God will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. So the Amalekites would continue to provide a threat to Israel. And we see one of those occasions in 1 Samuel chapter 15, in verses 1 to 3, in the time of Saul. Samuel said to Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people Israel. Now therefore hearken to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass." So the instruction is given for Saul to wipe out the Amalekites, to leave no survivors. But he doesn't obey. And as we read further on in 1 Samuel 15, we have the story of Saul's disobedience, and he doesn't carry out those instructions. And as a result of that, then he will lose the kingdom. But the Amalekites would be that continual threat to Israel from generation to generation. We'll move on to chapter 18 now, and there's a change in tone here. Really, we've gone from people complaining and battle going on to the arrival now of Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. So, chapter 18, verses 1 to 12. Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her away, and her two sons, of whom the name of the one was Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land, and the name of the other Eleazar, for he said, the God of my father was my help, and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. And when one told Moses, "Lo, your father-in-law Jethro is coming to you with your wife and her two sons with her," Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and did obeisance and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. Then Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good which the Lord had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because he delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians when they dealt arrogantly with them." And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, offered a burnt offering and sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. Moses then now is visited by Jethro, his father-in-law, who's also the priest of Midian. We've met him earlier in the book in chapter 2 and in chapter 3 as well. Now, Jethro has heard reports of what had happened in Egypt, and this news must have spread quite rapidly throughout the region. Jethro brings with him Moses' wife Zipporah and their two sons Gershom and Eleazar, whom Moses had sent home. We don't know when Moses had sent her away back to her father. The last time his wife and children were mentioned was in chapter 4, verses 24 to 26, where there was that strange incident concerning circumcision, where Zipporah had to circumcise Moses' son there. So perhaps it was after that incident that Moses sent her back, or perhaps during at some point when Moses was in Egypt. But anyway, she's gone back to her father with the two children there. And the meaning of the names given to his sons is explained here, and really they reflect Moses' circumstances. In the name of Gershom, he says, "For I've been a sojourner in a foreign land." That's a reference to the time he was in Egypt, or perhaps the time when he was in Midian. And the name of the other, Eleazar, he says, "The God of my father was my help." The name means God is my helper. So the names of the sons indicate Moses' circumstances. So at this time, the Israelites must have been quite close to Jethro's home. They are encamped in the wilderness at the mountain of God, and it was here that Moses was looking after Jethro's flocks when he saw the burning bush. Back in chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, he was at what was called then the mountain of God. So in accordance with Eastern custom, Moses received Jethro with honor, doing obeisance and kissing him. And then Moses was able to relate to him all of the events that had happened in Egypt and all that's happened so far on their journey. And on hearing of these things, Jethro rejoiced and he praised the Lord Yahweh. And he acknowledged that the Lord Yahweh is greater than all gods. Perhaps that's an indication there that he doesn't just believe in one God alone, but he believes that the Lord is greater than any other God, all other gods. And Jethro offered then burnt offerings and sacrifices to the Lord, and they ate together along with Aaron and the elders of Israel, ate before God. So they share this fellowship meal together, which indicates this fellowship between Moses and his father-in-law, that they are eating before God there. And then the final incident here in chapter 18 concerns the appointment of judges to help Moses in his work at the suggestion or the advice of Jethro. So verse 13 says, "On the morrow, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand about you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between a man and his neighbor, and I make them know the statutes of God and his decisions." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You're not able to perform it alone. Listen now to my voice. I will give you counsel, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall teach them the statutes and the decisions, and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, choose able men from all the people, such as fear God, men who are trustworthy and who hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as rulers of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace. So Moses gave heed to the voice of his father-in-law, and did all that he had said. Moses chose able men out of all Israel, and made them heads over the people, rulers of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And they judged the people at all times. Hard cases they brought to Moses, but any small matter they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his way to his own country. Jethro observed the strain and the burden that Moses was under in leading the people and organizing the people in settling disputes between them. And the situation was not only wearing out Moses, it was also wearing out the people because they had to wait so long for their cases to be settled. They're standing around all day waiting for Moses to listen to their case. So Moses was trying to do everything himself, not out of any sort of personal ambition, but through his anxiety and his conscientiousness that he wanted to do a good job. So Jethro advised Moses then to organize things, organize an administration of justice by setting men over the people as rulers of thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. And then these rulers were to judge in small matters, whilst the greater matters would be left for Moses to settle. The character of those who were to be chosen for this is indicated there in verse 21, that he's told to choose able men, those such as fear God, men who are trustworthy and who hate a bribe. So they had to be of a certain character, to have those characteristics which would make them suitable for the job. So Moses would present the case to God, and then he would make known the laws and the decisions of the people, so that they would know how to behave and how to be guided. So Moses took the advice of Jethro, showing his wisdom and his humility that he accepted this advice, and he introduced this system. Later on in the book of Numbers, in Numbers chapter 11, uh, Moses complains to God that he's being overburdened, and on this occasion, God instructs him to appoint 70 men as elders of Israel to help him bear the burden. So, Numbers chapter 11, verse 14, he says, again, it's the people have been complaining about things, and Moses is getting tired of this. He says to God, I'm not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If thou wilt deal thus with me, kill me at once. If I find favor in thy sight, that I may not see my wretchedness. He's at the point of wanting to give up here. And then the Lord says to Moses, gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting and let them take their stand there with you. So God is providing for Moses there through those 70 elders who were to be appointed. Whether they're in addition to these that Moses appoints here on Jethro's advice is not clear. So there's some important lessons on leadership, really, that we can learn from this incident. The importance of delegation, that sometimes someone who's trying to do everything, not necessarily out of wanting to be in control, but simply out of a desire to do the best they can. And sometimes people take on too much. And so it's good to be able to delegate to others, and the importance of looking at the qualities that people have, that they're able to do that work, that they have to be qualified for those things. So there's some principles there which would apply to elders in the New Testament, or church leaders in the New Testament as well. So that brings us to the end of chapter 18, and the people are really on the verge of now of reaching Mount Sinai.